Good morning. You are attending the Animal Control Commission hearings for December 7th, 2020. The Animal Control Commission was established and is conducted in accordance with Article 12 of the Arundel County Code. These are administrative hearings, and by nature they are informal, which means you are not hampered by rules of evidence. However, please be aware that you are still testifying under oath. Each party will have their opportunity to state their case. After each party states their case, they will have an opportunity to ask questions of the other party. Please do not interrupt the other party. You will be given ample time to talk. In many cases, we are aware that there is a history. You may briefly tell the commission about the history. However, please focus on the issue at hand. After each case, the commission will have open deliberations. During these deliberations, the public may not participate. If the commissioners have any additional questions, you may answer those questions. No further information will be heard and a decision will be rendered. This decision is a recommendation to the chief of police or his representative. The recommendation of the commission will be taken into consideration and a final decision will be made by the chief of police or his designated representative. If, as the defendant in the case, you are unhappy with the decision of the commission, you may appeal. For citation cases, appeals are made through the District Court of Maryland. For administrative orders, namely potentially dangerous, or vicious orders, appeals are made through the County Board of Appeals. Please call the first case.
Alrighty. So our first case today is going to be Animal Care and Control versus Diane Turner, the potentially dangerous order for Rue the dog and the appeal of the potentially dangerous order for Penny the dog. Sorry about that. Just having connection issues from Hardline now. Hopefully that's out of the way. So let me try to bring Ms. Turner up one more time. There we go. Ms. Turner, if you would unmute and start your video up. Perfect. I can see you. Can you hear me okay?
I can now, yes.
Perfection. Thank you. And if you would please state your name and address for the record.
Diane Turner, 103 Mead Drive, Annapolis, Maryland, 21440.
Thank you kindly, and wait for just 1 minute. We'll get everyone sworn in all together towards the end here.
Okay.
Let's see, I've got. Yeah, I had the hard line. I was having issues, yes. So we've got one Kenneth Matthew. Let me see if I can get him on the line here. I don't see him. We have Officer Simpson as well.
All right. So my computer is desktop. It's 4:1 again.
Officer Simpson, if you'd like to state your name and address for the record while reaching out to Mr. Matthew.
Yes, it's Officer Simpson with Anne Arundel County Animal Care and Control, 411 Maxwell Fry Road, Millersville, Maryland, 21108.
Thank you, sir. Have you heard from Mr. Matthew, Officer Simpson? I'm not getting any answer on his end.
I haven't heard from him now.
All right. All right, that is no reply from Mr. Matthew, unfortunately. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and swear both of you in. If you would please give me an affirmative at the end of this. Do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Thank you both, and we can proceed.
Good morning, panel. On September 23rd, 2020, Animal Care and Control received a call from a Kenneth Matthew advising he was walking his dog Lucky, a white altered female West Highland Terrier, on a leash that was just attacked by two St. Bernards a few hours ago. Mr. Matthew advised he was walking his dog Lucky on Mead Drive in Annapolis, Maryland, when a large female St. Bernard, brown, black, and white in color, approached him and his dog that just escaped from the yard at 103 Mead Drive. The St. Bernard then attacked Lucky, and before Mr. Matthew could prevent the incident, the St. Bernard had Lucky in her mouth. Mr. Matthew advises, while trying to fight off the St. Bernard, a second female St. Bernard, approximately the same color, from the yard of 103 Mead Drive, jumped on him trying to attack Lucky as well. Mr. Matthew advises he spent approximately 2 to 3 minutes fighting with these two St. Bernards as they attacked his dog. Before a young man on the corner of Holly Drive and Mead Drive was able to assist him in stopping the two dogs from attacking Lucky. A few minutes later, the owner of the two female St. Bernard types, a Diane Turner, who resides at 103 Mead Drive, was eventually able to secure her two dogs to her property. Mr. Matthew advises briefly exchanging information with Mrs. Turner when noticing at least 2 puncture wounds on his dog that were bleeding. Mr. Matthew also knows that he had sustained a laceration to a finger from the incident. He advised, though, that he did not receive medical care for that injury. Mr. Matthew then transports Lucky to Bay Ridge Animal Hospital in Annapolis for treatment. Lucky is diagnosed with puncture wounds to the chest and the thigh area. Also, lacerations and abrasions are observed on the shoulder, the neck, and the thigh areas. Lucky undergoes surgery and receives 4 sutures and 1 drain. That evening, I received medical records and photos of Lucky's wounds. On September 28, 2020, owners Todd Turner and Diane Turner transferred both Rue and Penny to animal control. Both dogs were signed over to Officer DeSantos as mandatory impounds. No prior incidents are found reported on these 2 dogs. October 1st, 2020, I received a statement of events from Mrs. Turner of the incident involving her 2 dogs, Rue and Penny, attacking Mr. Matthews' dog, Lucky, on September 23rd, 2020. In Mrs. Turner's written statement, she advises hearing Rue and Penny barking outside in the backyard on that date of the 23rd. Mrs. Turner goes into her backyard deck and observes both of her dogs trying to get over the backyard fence. Mrs. Turner then runs back into the house to retrieve leashes for both of her dogs. When she returns back to the outside, both her dogs are not in sight. Mrs. Turner advises seeing Mr. Matthew and his dog Lucky on the corner of the road before she eventually is able to call and retrieve both of her dogs, securing them to the yard. Mrs. Turner does advise in a written statement that she reimbursed Mr. Matthew for Lucky's medical expenses. On October 5th, 2020, after careful review of the evidence by myself and the field supervisor of Animal Care and Control, it was decided that the owners of Rue and Penny, Todd Turner and Diane Turner, would be issued a potentially dangerous order due to the public safety violations under Arundel County Article 12402A3 and Article 12402A5 under public safety, and Article 1240905, animals running at large. On October 6, 2020, Todd Turner and Diane Turner was served a potentially dangerous order for their dogs, Rue and Penny. The order was signed and returned to Animal Care and Control on that same date, with an appeal letter requesting a commission date. Date was set for November 2nd, 2020, later postponed to December 7th, 2020. On October 9th, 2020, Mrs. Turner informed the public safety officer that she was ready for an inspection. On October 13th, 2020, I responded to 103 Mead Drive for the PDO inspection. At this time, Mrs. Turner and Mr. Turner were in compliance with all the requirements within the potentially dangerous order. Both Rue and Penny were redeemed that day from animal care and control by the Turners. This incident occurred in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. As of December 7th, 2020, Rue and Penny reside at the home of the owners of Diane Turner and Todd Turner, located at 103 Mead Drive in Annapolis, Maryland, 21043. So I would just like to present the board with a few pictures of the injuries. This is Mr. Matthews' finger that somehow received a laceration. If we can get that in there better. Right there. These are Lucky, pictures of photos of Lucky here with sutures that he received, mostly on the like the side of the flank in his shoulder area. This is one of the punctures that kind of shows you the relation of how deep it is and how large it was. This just shows you some of the abrasions and another puncture. I think this is just another angle of another puncture.
I think it's a little farther.
So I don't have anything else at this time.
Okay, before we proceed to Ms. Turner, since you're in full compliance with the order, what is it you're appealing?
So I wanted to appeal some of the conditions based on the article of 12-4-403, the conditions, and it says that when an animal is determined to be potentially dangerous or dangerous by the agency may order the owner to abide by some or all of the following conditions. And this was a first offense for them, and every one of the conditions was applied. So there was no difference between a potentially dangerous or dangerous order, within terms of compliance for conditions. So, I wanted to point that out. And also the fact that it only took me 30 seconds to get from my house or the middle of my deck out to the edge of a truck that was parked at the end of my driveway. At that point, the dogs were nowhere near Mr. Matthew and his dog. They weren't even visible. As I called Penny, she came out from around the truck. I had to get her into the house. Her collar had been, 2 collars had been yanked off of her. So I had to get her in the house. And then I called for Rue, and Rue was not anywhere near the dog either. And, they came to me and I got them in the house. Then I returned to the corner where I did speak with Mr. Matthew and provide my information. The dog stood there stood fine. I personally did not see any blood on the dog. I saw one brown spot that looked like brown fur, but no red blood, indicating that there had been any punctures that were of a serious or severe attack. And in terms of Mr. Matthews' finger, I did see that, and it was more of a scrape. and there was no blood coming from that either. And with regards to the amount of time that it does take to get from the middle of my deck out to, it takes 1 minute and 25 seconds to get up to, from the middle of my deck up to the corner to where this incident occurred. And I taught that last night. It was dark and I had to unlock 3 locks in order to get out the door. So my response to them getting out was much quicker than a couple of minutes. And so then, so, you know, and within regards to the articles in 12.402, section 3 and section 5, you know, with all of those conditions, there is leaving no leeway for further conditions should another incident occur, which hopefully it will not. And then I was also on September 30th, when I spoke with Officer Simpson, he said that he was leaning towards the ruling to be PDO with a 6-foot fence, auto gate closings, and with a lock, insurance for each dog, and possibly muzzle collar harness and possibly spade. But then the notice of safety impoundment that we received, it points out that that if a dangerous order is issued, that there may be other fees associated with the conditions imposed in a dangerous order, including but not limited to spay-neuter fees, microchipping, and annual license fees. So with a PDO, potentially dangerous order, we were also the dangerous qualification or conditions were also applied there. When the dogs were, when our dogs were deemed potentially dangerous and kept there, they were kept beyond the 10-day quarantine time, and they were released in 15 days as opposed to the 10, which it stated on the order. On one of the forms that I eventually got copies of.
Ma'am,
Yes.
that's not true. The dogs weren't quarantined. The dogs are held at animal control until you either come into compliance or you don't. They could be there for 6 months.
Well, on the form that I have, it does state quarantine. It's checked off quarantine.
It may say quarantine, but there's no fast rule that says after 10 days you get the dog back. You have to be in compliance.
Okay.
Both are true, man. But there's a 10-day quarantine for a rabies issue, but as Larry said, the animal would be quarantined until you came in full compliance.
We weren't given compliance.
10-day rabies quarantine.
And you know, we didn't get the order for compliance until until 2 weeks, and then to be compliant, you know, like in the next day, it was totally impossible to be able to do that. And so given that, I'm requesting that it be changed to, modified to change to a warning, and to be some of the conditions modified, especially when it comes to a second barrier that is 3 steps away from an initial barrier that goes to the only door in my house that is used to go outside where there isn't a fence. There was already a gate across one of the spaces to keep the dogs out of the living room, and that door is never used, and it has 2 locks on it. It's hard to open, and it has a locked storm door. And that presents a challenge for me, coming in with items and going through one gate, taking 3 more steps, having hands full, going through, trying to get another gate open, the door open, to be able to get into that particular room. And then with some of the orders that we received 2 different orders. The first one did not require spaying, and then modification training was listed And then was required in one place, and then on another page, it was same order, it was recommended. Then there was a second order that was sent out where it was required. So the apparently it was to have been a clerical error, and this entire case has been rife with errors. So that, and I'm also requesting that since I'm a senior, that there be a reduction on the cost of the tags for annual cost of tags for the two dogs. Those are major expenses that it's difficult for me to incur.
I have a question, Ms. Turner. You mentioned you have a door in your house that's got two locks on it that you don't use.
Yes.
You must have put up a secondary barrier in order to get approved for.
I did, and it's that second barrier that makes it is 3 steps away from another barrier that makes it difficult for me to. I mean, the barrier was up before the dogs even came home. Okay, so to get approval, so it's there, but it's very difficult for me to get from room to room with that other barrier to doors that aren't used.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Todd, did you want to say anything?
No.
Okay.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Mrs. Turner, could you explain how it happened? And the follow-up question to that is how are you going to prevent this from happening in the future?
Okay, so I work from home. I let the dogs out, and I have a fenced-in backyard, and I heard them barking, and I went out, and they were trying to get over the fence, a specific corner of the fence. There had been, I had a canopy. Are you familiar with the car canopies that have like the covering that goes over them, and that you drive the car and you park it in that? I had
Yes.
one of those taken down, and somebody put the persons taking it down put the poles that were associated with the canopy leaning up against the fence, and apparently that with the weight of those pulled a portion of the fence away in this one particular corner where the dogs had got out.
Okay,
Was it-
thank you.
Question?
Thank you. The follow-up question was how they got out. So they got out in that corner of the fence. Have they ever gotten out before?
No. So,
Okay,
and then,
never-
so, well, they've jumped the fence, but that was the 4-foot fence. And so now I had additional fencing put on top of that, and they had not gotten out since I put the additional fencing on top. Now, to keep them from getting out, I have a 6-foot wooden fence all the way around the property.
Is that a newly added fence then? Did you
Yes,
replace the old one?
It was part of the order.
Okay, right. But you replaced it entirely?
Yes, all the way around.
Okay, good. Have they ever gotten out of the front door?
No. No.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Ms. Turner?
No, I believe that's it.
Okay, so as I understand it, the two things you are challenging is the secondary barrier on the unused door and the annual fee on the dogs. Is that correct?
Oh, that and the training mandate.
And the training mandate? Oh.
Yes. There was nothing listed as an outcome.
So, I mean, I'm making maybe some generalizations or some assumptions here about the training requirement, but that is so that number one, you understand your dogs and their capabilities, and also to help give you some additional guidance on prevention. I'm sure, more information is always beneficial and helpful. And the most important thing here is to prevent this from ever happening again. So.
I understand that, but in terms of the behavioral training, it's like, but with what outcome? That it just doesn't. It wasn't stated to know for me to know what to even begin to look for. In terms of
What training to get?
what training to actually get, and from what type of person to actually get it from. And some of those end up being rather, quite expensive.
I can answer that, but it would take a while. So yeah, training is meant to assist you again in giving you tools to prevent this and to understand your dogs maybe more, because they do have the capability of harming other animals. So that would be what I would think would be the objective. So, but we could talk a long time on that subject. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else to add, Ms. Turner?
No. Well, and then, if there's because this was a first offense, and to have been, some of the conditions, you can't walk back. You can't walk back spaying. You can't walk back, a 6-foot fence, that type of thing. And so that if this, and to make a warning, because this was a first offense for them.
Okay. But are you denying that the dogs did the damage to Lucky?
Well, I did not see that. They said that, he said that it was my dogs. My dogs were out front, that type of thing. I paid for them. So I guess I am assuming that the dogs did do it, but I did not see it.
Okay.
And he's not here to, and I know that he provided statements, but some of those, in terms of like him being bitten, later on there's a statement where it was but it was scraped, that kind of thing. In terms of, for a first offense, all of the conditions were, applied to them, not some where there's the discretion to apply some. So that's what I wanted to bring to light.
And did both dogs bite?
And how do we know which dog bit them? Did both dogs do it? I don't know.
Well, that's a good question. I was going to ask Officer Simpson that, because both dogs are charged. So how was it determined that both dogs were guilty?
Yeah, so just according to Mr. Matthews' statement, he advises that both dogs, he observes both dogs attacking Lucky at the same time, back and forth for approximate time of 1 to 2 minutes. But unfortunately, he's not here to testify, so I'm just all I can go is by with his statement. But I can add too as well is that if according to Mrs. Turner's time frame, that these dogs within a matter of seconds were able to escape the yard and then attack this dog and inflict this type of injuries to the dog within a matter of seconds. So, I mean, we have to look at that as well.
Well, I saw them jumping the fence, up at the corner, doing the jump to get out of that corner. And so that's why I was able to get through the house so quickly, running through it. And when I timed my last night, that was walking and it was dark and, and unlocking doors. And I did not have to unlock doors the day that the incident occurred. And I've timed myself running from the middle of my deck, stopping to get a leash, running out the door, and it was approximately 30 seconds.
Have the dogs ever jumped the fence before, Mrs. Turner? The previous fence?
Yeah, the previous metal fence.
Not the fence you have installed now.
Just the chain link fence. When we put the additional 18 inches of fencing on top of that, they've not been able to jump over it that stopped them from jumping. It was because that additional material that was there was pulled away by someone leaning poles up against the additional fencing. Now, of course, that's all of that is still there, and on the yard side of it, 6 feet of wooden fencing has been placed all the way around my yard, which you can attest to because you were here and you took pictures of it.
Yes, absolutely. Now, when they jumped the fence before, did they actually escape the yard?
Yes,
Okay.
but it was a standard chain link fence height. Nothing with any additional fencing on top of it. The one that put the additional fencing on top, they've not been able to jump over it.
Since then, you've built in the whole.
But since then, now we've done the whole, the wooden fence thing.
So they did have a history of jumping out of your property over the fence.
And that would be to play with the dog next door, that type of thing, but not, roaming the neighborhood because, but that was a standard height chain link fence. And with the addition of that other part, they've not been able to get out of the yard.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Turner, I have a question.
Sure.
So both dogs are not spayed, they're intact females?
Now, they had to be spayed now because in order to get them at home.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out what items, again, continuing the discussion of where we have some flexibility and what we feel strongly about, and like where we, like you said, I see your point in terms of potentially dangerous versus dangerous, and that all of the restrictions are in place. And so, seeing where it is that you wanted flexibility, that's why I was just wondering if what had been done so far, and where we can help.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else to add before we close for deliberations?
No.
Officer Simpson, anything?
No, I'm done.
Is there a reason that Mr. Matthew didn't join us?
I tried to contact him last week and I haven't heard anything, so I'm not sure.
And I
left
do
messages.
I don't know if I can add this or not, but I do want to say that we were very cooperative with animal control in this, and in terms of we even surrendered the dogs ourselves, as opposed to sending someone here. And throughout the entire process, everything that, all the communication has been very cordial, and I've, complied with all of the requests.
We do really appreciate that you just showing that you're a responsible owner, and that is, the best case scenario. What we all want is for Penny and Rue to be home, which they are, and but that we thank you for your prompt compliance and showing that you're a responsible pet owner. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ms. Turner, I have a question before we deliberate.
Yes.
That unused door that's got 2 locks on it, where does it lead to?
It leads outside. Well, you open the front door, it's got 2 locks on it, and then there's a storm door that has a lock to it. That door, and that leads outside, but that door is never used. Because we had to post signs, potentially dangerous dog.
Say it goes through your living room.
No, that's not what he's talking about. So you're talking about the door, it goes outside. That's the door with the locks on it. And then I have even posted on that door, in addition to the potentially dangerous sign, I've posted not an entrance, use other door, and I have a big arrow pointing to the other door. So when somebody comes into the house, they go into my kitchen, and that's where I have, because I have a small Cape Cod. And so that's where there's a barrier from the kitchen, to keep the dogs from being able to go out the kitchen door. and then you take 3 steps, and there's another barrier to keep them from going into the living room, and then out that other door that I'm talking about. I've had a fence, not a fence, a gate that leans up against it. The dogs know that they are not allowed in the living room, and the gate that's leaned up there has kept them out of the living room for years. They're allowed in the living room Christmas morning to see what Santa Claus brought them, and they go through the living room to go up the stairs to go to bed at night. But other than that, they know they're not allowed to get into the living room. And that, so what I had worked, and it's because the door is not used and it's got 3 locks on it and it's hard to open. I just would prefer to not have to have a permanent barrier there, so that I can, because it's a challenge for me to pick up big boxes and even lift them up and get through the barrier that's a kitchen door, and then to try to walk 3 steps and open another gate to get to the living room and up the stairs. So it's just very challenging for me to have to do that.
Okay, just to clarify, you said that there were 2 locks on the door one time and then 3 locks on the second time?
No. There's always been 3 locks. It's 2. There's a wooden door,
Right.
and there's a regular lock and a deadbolt.
Right.
So when you open that, then there's a storm door, a lock on that.
Okay, that's fine.
So there's 2 doors, 3 locks, and it's always been like that.
That's
So,
fine. Officer Sims.
I'm not following. Can we real quick? I'm not following. So you're saying that these 2 doors exist in the front of your house and are not used, correct?
Correct.
And the only door that you come in and out of the house of is the kitchen door, correct?
Correct.
And the kitchen door is what now has the secondary barrier that has been required in this order, correct?
It does, as well as, so, okay.
As well as the other barrier.
As well as the other barrier, you take 3 steps, 3 physical steps, and there's another barrier to go into the living room. Because it's a Cape Cod, those little square little foyers, and then all the rooms go off of it.
Right.
So, Tom, to your point, you're requesting the barrier, one of the barriers at the front door that's not used, but when you come in the kitchen door, there's a living room barrier, but it sounds like that's one that you've imposed for your dogs not to get into the living room, not one that we've imposed.
No.
That was there before.
That was there before, and then it was imposed that come down because it was leaned. It was just something I could take down with one hand, but it was fine. It kept them out. So, but then it was imposed that a permanent barrier go up there, and in trying to get the locked, unlocked and opened, that kind of thing, it presents a challenge. And 3 feet, when I just walk 3 steps from the kitchen into the little foyer, then you walk 3 steps to the other door, not door, but entryway into the living room. It's just that I have like 5 rooms off of this little foyer: a kitchen, a living room, the office that I'm in now, a bathroom, and the dining room. And the dining room has been set up as the room with the lock and key. So if anybody comes in, I have to put them in there and lock them. But then it's just a challenge that nobody goes into my living room. It's a room that is not used hardly at all.
I think the issue here is this: the secondary barrier is meant for those dogs not to be able to bolt out of the door if someone comes to the door or whatever. So if you're partitioning the dogs from going to a door that you wouldn't use anyway, that doesn't really make a difference to us. What makes a difference to us would be that the secondary barrier is intended. I understand that it does cause you problems coming in and out with groceries and such, but that is intended to keep the dog from bolting out of the door. If the only door you use to get in and out of the house, that's the door that is it appropriate to have that.
Well, there is the only door that I use to go in and out of the house is the kitchen door. Right. And that's what there is a barrier there. And I'm not asking that come down, that can stay in place. That's fine.
Okay.
Oh.
So this is
And
what, this
that's
is
the only, that's the only door that they would technically bolt out of. They would not ever bolt out the front door because the front door is never used.
all right. It's
If somebody
becoming a little
comes-
more clear now. So you're saying there's
Right.
another barrier near the front door that's causing you more discomfort. All right, I get it.
Right.
Right.
And if somebody knocks on my front door, I tap on the kitchen window and point them to the kitchen door. I've always done that.
Okay. Officer Simpson, I have a question. If her unused front door is a solid wood door with 2 locks on it, and there's another storm door with a lock on it, doesn't that qualify as a secondary barrier in itself?
I mean, you could qualify it. Well, I mean, if it's not used, but a lot of these cases where we put up secondary barriers, there's a storm door with a lock, and there's also a normal door. We still require the barriers, but that would be up to the panel to decide. Now, I can clarify this a little bit. I have pictures of this that I took during the inspection. I can show you what she's talking about. This is the living room. I believe she's talking about right here, where it shows the barrier going in there.
Right.
I think that's the one you want eliminated. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then this is the kitchen barrier that goes to that side door. That's correct.
That goes to the kitchen door, and that goes into
Yeah.
the kitchen, and then that goes to another door. And that's the door I use all the time and that people use when they come into my house. So that was to keep the dogs from going into the kitchen. If somebody comes to the door, that keep them away until I lock them in the dining room, which is on the same floor.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that
Okay.
Anything else to add before we close for deliberations?
No.
And it is true that you haven't had any kind of training for the dogs yet?
Correct.
Okay, and that you're asking us to waive that requirement?
Yes.
Okay, just to clarify.
If not, could you be more specific in terms of the outcomes that are expected? Because the type of behavior, the type of person that I look for. I mean, are they supposed to be trained where they could walk off a leash? I know that the county has a leash law. I mean, I don't know what the outcomes should be to know that it's been successful. Or are you just looking for them to just be in a class and,
That's a fair question. Officer Simpson, can you answer that?
Well, I think basically a lot of trainers do what they call behavior modification. And it's basically conditioning your dogs. I used to train dogs for many years. Basically condition your dog not to attack another dog. Takes, a lot of time and effort, but you can never really take aggression out of a dog. If a dog is aggressive toward little dogs or big dogs, most likely they'll always have those aggressions. But behavior modification helps to prevent dogs from going after other dogs and attacking them. It's not a cure-all, but it can help. And that's what we'd like to see from Mrs. Turner, to do some kind of behavior modification, to see if it'll lessen some of the dog's aggressions and condition them not to attack. Because from what we see on this attack, I mean, they for some reason they must have saw that dog through the fence, and they did whatever they could to jump on that dog within seconds. And, we'd like to prevent that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else to add before we close?
So you close, I mean, do I stay connected and there's a decision made now, or do you, contact me through a letter, or I don't know how this goes.
We will deliberate online here. You will be able to witness the entire discussion and a decision will be rendered.
Okay. And then during the discussion, I'm not allowed to say anything. Is that correct?
Unless we ask you questions.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Our decision is a recommendation to the chief of police. So it take that for what it's worth.
Right. You can appeal. Okay, we are now closed for deliberations. Stephanie?
pictures helped a lot. Like I had said before, I appreciate that Mrs. Turner is a responsible owner and compliant. I'd like to help her where she can, where we can. With that picture, I'd be willing to be lenient on that secondary barrier in that living room area. But honestly, they got out, and this is about them at large and doing damage during that. I mean, the level of damage, even if it's their first offense, it was pretty significant puncture wounds. So for me, I feel like I'm not comfortable dropping it down to a warning. She is in compliance, and I think that's wonderful because they're young dogs and they have a long life ahead of them. So preventing them from getting out, I think, is a really important public safety. So I feel that my decision and my recommendations to the group would be to uphold both for Penny and for Rue, the potentially dangerous orders to prevent this from happening. But I'd be willing to be lenient on that secondary barrier. And training, I mean, I'm flexible on that as well. She did have good recall on the dogs, that when she went out there with leashes to get them, she was able to recall both of them. It's like when they're not in her presence, they were mischievous and got out, but when they're in her presence, she did have good recall. The purpose, and we don't pursue outcomes. I think that's beyond the scope at this point. It's a recommendation and then there's time where we make it a requirement, and I don't really know the difference in that. But for 2 dogs, as officer was talking about, that socialization is probably, it's a good idea, but there's not a measurable outcome. And that would just be, to Elizabeth's point, it's just, it's good practice, and it's certainly never a loss and can always be beneficial to the owner and to the pet. So yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense, but there's not a measurable outcome that we can pursue. So if she's not wanting to pursue training in terms of socialization, I'd be flexible on that. She did have good recall on them, but I mean, any dog can benefit from that. So it's, still, in my professional opinion, a good idea, but I'm flexible on it. So that's where I am. I'm flexible to 2 things that she requested.
All right, thank you. Ed?
Yeah, in looking at this this case, I don't think it was as much of a situation where the dogs got out of the house as it is they got out of the yard. So my main concern on the panel here is the 6-foot fence, the fencing, so that this won't repeat again. In saying that, the only way to make sure that that is maintained is to leave the PDO in place. I don't think lowering it to a warning letter comes with enforcing the outside fencing. So having said that, in my opinion, nothing else in the PDO really would prevent the situation that's in front of us besides the outside fencing, in my opinion, because the dogs didn't get out of the house. They didn't run out of the house. And they didn't attack a human. They attacked another dog. So I think the fencing is, I believe, at number 3 in the PDO. I think that needs to remain intact, and the PDO needs to remain intact so that that fencing is maintained, whether there's more damage to it or it leans or whatever. The county doesn't have any enforcement if that PDO isn't in place with that recommendation or that requirement. So that's my only issue. It's the fencing. If you want to modify it in any other way, I'm good with it as long as that fencing stays in place. And that's basically all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Tom?
So I agree so far with keeping the PDO in order. I'm I'm fine with, I'd be with, making, I kind of agree with Stephanie that there's no real measurable way to determine, even if they're required to have training, that that we're seeing any sort of, there's no, I think a recommendation there is appropriate. As far as the secondary barriers go, I mean, I agree that this incident didn't take place, from the dogs getting out of the house, but I do believe that these are two, very large breed dogs, and with two of them at one time, potentially, the potential for those dogs to get out of the house without that barrier, I think is a little higher. I would just like to see the one on the door that's mainly used to come in and out of the house. I don't really care about the ones towards the front door if they're not using the front door. I don't know if we can specify that, but I'd prefer to keep something there if possible, but I'm lenient there. But otherwise, I think everything should just stand as it is. The fencing's good, and I think that's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth?
Okay, thanks. Let's see. Well, like Stephanie, I want to give the Turners credit for putting the things in place that they have done, particularly, as Ed mentioned, the fencing, replacing the whole fencing. I think that was a very wise, it was obviously a recommendation, but the fact that they replaced it entirely should be credited to them. Let's see. So on the barriers, I agree with everyone here on the barriers that I can be lenient on the one to the door that's not used at all. But the kitchen one will remain just as she has stated and agreed to that. The training, obviously, it's a huge, very, very broad topic. And for these particular dogs, because they are young, and socialization, that is one thing that's time consuming, and it may be more costly in the long run. So I understand that if that is not something that someone wants to pursue, it's not like that is, plus we don't know how effective and that will be in terms of preventing further and future incidents and injury. The other thing about training is, I mean, and it is a difficult thing in the orders, because there aren't very many parameters around it, but it's hard to place those parameters around it. Every dog needs something different. Every person needs something different. But in these cases, and I think the intention and the reason why it's in there is so that they give people some assistance in recognizing what's in their dogs. I mean, every dog does not have the potential every dog that gets out of the backyard doesn't necessarily go, straight beeline to another dog and do injury. And when you have that, when you have an incident like this and you have injury, and we know that we've seen injury from mild to very severe, it's important to know how to prevent that. It's their responsibility, and trainers can help. Oops, sorry, we had an extra visitor there. We had, I think he has something to say. When you have ones with potential to do injury, it's important to recognize that, and you have a different level of expectation in your training and prevention. So trainers not only train dogs, but they can also give guidance on how to manage, how to identify what characteristics in your dog that can do that lead to more severe injury or aggression, and tools to prevent that from happening. And they help the dog. And meet the dog's needs. So it's a big topic. I am okay with being flexible on that, although I do highly recommend it, but I'm okay with being flexible on that. So without going further and risk the visitor having some additional comments, I'll forgo any other conversation on that. But the barrier is the flexibility here for me. The PDO is not.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think the panel's in pretty much agreement. To me, the front door that's unused already has a secondary barrier, unless I'm wrong. I mean, it's got a wooden door with 2 locks, and it's got a storm door with a lock. That's 2 barriers. So I have no problem waiving that. While I think Training would be strongly recommended. I don't think I'm willing to say it's a must. These are big dogs. They're young dogs. They're, they got a lot of force if they get a head of steam up. But I can be lenient on that. I would strongly recommend it, but I don't think I want to mandate it. Do we have a motion from anybody?
Before we go to a motion,
Yeah.
one thing that she did mention, and you mentioned specifically, Larry, was they discussed the fees, and none of us has discussed what we thought about the fees. I don't think there's anything we can do about the fees. Is that,
Well, we in the past, we've recommended that, they be lowered.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of her specific requests and something none of us touched on. So
I think it's a licensing fee, and I'm
Right.
not sure that that's something I don't know that fines. I think we have recommendations on fines, but licensing fees, I don't think so.
yeah, I believe that the fees with the PDO, that licensing fee goes up, and then with the DO, it goes up even higher. So
Correct.
I'm fine with leaving it the way it is. I just wanted to, I know specifically, so I wanted to make sure it was discussed.
All right.
So for the financial considerations, then the training obviously is cost money. So if that's maybe that's a compromise there, allowing those funds to be used for licensing versus training or something, some type of compromise.
That's a good idea.
I'm trying to go through the PDOs for both Penny and Rue, and it looks like number 9 is the secondary barriers on both of those. That what we're talking about is removing the living room barrier, so we can be specific about that. And it looks like the training is number 12. And that just states to seek and obtain formal private behavior modification training for Rue to start within 90 days of receipt of this order and show proof of compliant or completed. So that's number 12. I'm just trying to, I try to get myself before we make a motion to know which numbers we're working with. 9 and 12, we want to modify 9 and maybe strike 12. Is in that we don't have the ability to change official fees. So I'm just kind of putting that out there before we make a motion. Anything else that we're missing?
Just on that number 9 on the barriers, I think that for me, what Larry said, that accepting the barriers that are in place now, because it is important to have the screen door that's locked and the wood door with double locks, so that's not, so that's still, it still has 2 barriers, maybe that's acceptable versus saying there isn't required a barrier over there.
I remember other times as talking about storm doors are not considered secondary barriers. Larry, remind me about that.
I thought
it's just not one that they mentioned as being, although it is for us 2 barriers, but in their compliance, I think they didn't accept storm doors. But nonetheless, what she had was a sort of a lean-to temporary living barrier for her own purposes, and she doesn't want a permanent one there. I'm not saying that a storm door is sufficient. I'm just saying I'm willing to be lenient on not having a barrier at that door that's not used. But I don't know if we can call the storm door compliant.
I do.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I would think that the idea of secondary barrier is keeping the dog from running out. If you're using either one of those doors that are right there, if you open that door, the dog has the opportunity to run right out. That's why the secondary barrier's got to keep the dog back from any opening. And you know what I mean? I can't see them being the same. But I agree that if they're not using the front door and it's hampering them getting around the house, there's no reason to make that a requirement if the kid.
Because they don't really have it at the picture shows they don't really have it at that front door unused. It's at the entrance to that entire room, at that living room. And I think that's what's the placement of it, the choice of putting it there instead of the front door. I would say the fencing, to Ed's point, the fencing is the number 1 thing for me, which was the problem. So that's why, even though there's still potential to get out that front door, if we remove that living room barrier, I'm still willing to be compliant about it because it wasn't the key issue. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are about that.
I would agree.
Motion if anybody's ready.
Yes, please.
All right, so I'll go ahead and move that we modify number 9 to specify the secondary barrier only be required in the kitchen. And I will move to modify number 12 to make it a recommendation instead of a requirement.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, please raise your hands. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And before we go on, Philip, are you there? I've got the minutes from last month and I got a couple questions for you.
Yes, sir.
The first page of the minutes, it says the commission hearing for November, yet on the bottom it shows we've already voted yes on all of the points. I'm confused.
So if you, that's the very first page, so it should be referencing the prior month's minutes.
It's referencing August, yes.
Yeah,
It's not the
so-
prior month, but it's referencing August.
On the November commission, we approved the minutes for the last couple. So it was the November meeting approving prior minutes. So that record is there that you guys voted on that last month.
Okay, so we're not voting on this, you just need my signature.
That particular page, yes. Now,
Okay.
what we are voting on is the approval of the November minutes,
Okay, which is the next, well,
which is the whole thing, essentially.
oh, okay.
The minutes just contain the prior approval from the November hearings.
Okay, I see, all right. Okay, so for November, okay, so I need a motion to accept November's minutes.
I move to accept the minutes from November.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? It's unanimous. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Thank you all.
Happy
Have a nice-
holiday.
Yes.
Happy
Happy
holidays,
holidays,
everyone.
everyone. Stay
You
safe.
too. Thank you all. Bye now.
Bye-bye.